You might have already seen these little quirky videos of world leaders recreating trends, doing triple axels, landing in splits, or dancing to TikTok songs. At first glance, it may seem funny. Who cares if people make fun of world leaders? Nobody likes them anyways. But what if I told you that this kind of mockery isn't always harmful to politicians? In fact, sometimes it does the exact opposite. Sometimes ridicule helps them win. Depicting politicians as harmless, reckless, or even incompetent individuals is actually a very old technique in political culture. Long before social media existed, politicians learned that if people laugh at you, they sometimes stop fearing you. And if they stop fearing you, they also stop scrutinizing you. What the internet is doing today for free is actually something political campaigns have quietly benefited from for decades and spent millions for. And in some cases, mockery backfired so badly that it helped politicians all the way to power. So today, we're going to look at several real examples where ridiculing politicians backfired in a wrongest way possible. Let's start with one of the clearest modern examples, Donald Trump. Long before he became president, Trump was widely treated as a joke candidate. When he announced his run for president in 2015, many media outlets assumed it was a publicity stunt. Late-night shows mocked him relentlessly. News commentators laughed at the idea that a reality TV star could ever become president. But the most famous moment happened in 2011 at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. During the event, then-President Barack Obama delivered a speech roasting Trump in front of journalists and celebrities.
No one is happier, no one is prouder to put this birth certificate matter to rest than the Donald. And that's because he can finally get back to focusing on the issues that matter. Like, did we fake the moon landing? What really happened in Roswell? And where are Biggie and Tupac?
The room was laughing. Trump was sitting there in the audience, stone-faced. At the time, the moment looked like a public humiliation. But in hindsight, many analysts believe that moment helped to form Trump's outsider narrative. Because for millions of voters watching from home, the scene didn't look like justice. It looked like the political elite laughing at someone they didn't take seriously. And Trump turned that perception into a campaign message. He positioned himself as the man the establishment hated. The more comedians mocked him, the more airtime he received. And airtime in politics is priceless. According to media studies during the 2016 election, Trump received billions of dollars worth of free media coverage, much of it negative. But visibility matters more than tone. If people constantly see your name, you dominate the conversation. Mockery turned Trump into the center of attention. And in politics, attention often translates into power.
Now let's go to Italy. Silvio Berlusconi.
He was one of the most controversial political figures in Europe, was convicted of tax fraud, used offshore companies to hide profits, and sentenced to 4 years in prison, which was later reduced due to age and amnesty. A billionaire media mogul with a flamboyant personality, endless scandals, and a reputation for outrageous statements. European newspapers often portrayed him as a buffoon. Comedians mocked his cosmetic surgeries, his parties, his jokes, and his sometimes bizarre speeches.
From the Italian Prime Minister, hey, Tony. No, impossibile. No, impossibile. This is the nation of Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Verdi, Firenze, Roma, Venezia.
To critics, he looked ridiculous, but to many voters, that ridicule came across as elitist snobbery. He understood something very important about media. If people laugh at you, they are still talking about you. And he leaned into it. Instead of trying to appear serious and reserved like traditional politicians, he embraced his image as an unconventional outsider. He joked about himself, he played the entertainer, and he used his television empire to stay constantly visible. As a result, despite scandals that would have ended most political careers, he served multiple terms as Italy's prime minister. The mockery never destroyed him, it helped shape his brand. He wasn't just a politician, he was a character. And characters are memorable.
Next, we go to the United Kingdom, And if you've ever seen photos of Boris Johnson, one thing immediately stands out: the hair. Messy. Chaotic. It looks less like the hairstyle of a head of government and more like someone who just ran through a wind tunnel on the way to Parliament. But that messy appearance became one of the most recognizable political brands in modern Britain. For years, British media portrayed Johnson as a bumbling eccentric, the kind of politician who forgets his notes, makes awkward jokes, and occasionally gets stuck halfway through a sentence. He regularly appeared on comedy programs like Have I Got News for You, a British satirical panel show where politicians are often the target of ridicule. On the show, he laughed at himself, stumbled through jokes, and played the role of the slightly clueless aristocrat who somehow wandered into politics. At times, he looked completely unserious. And that was exactly the point. Because many political observers later suggested that Johnson's public persona wasn't entirely accidental. The messy image served a purpose. It made him seem less threatening, less calculating, more like an ordinary, slightly chaotic human being, and that relatability mattered. Because politics often rewards candidates who feel familiar rather than intimidating. A perfectly polished politician can feel distant, artificial, and scripted, but a politician who looks like he just spilled coffee on his own speech notes, that feels human, and humans are easier to forgive. But here's where the story becomes interesting, because behind that messy hair and comedic persona was a political career filled with serious controversies. And yet, for years, many voters still saw Johnson as harmless. Take one of the earliest examples. Over the years, Johnson made numerous remarks that critics described as offensive or insensitive. For example, in 2002 he referred to African people in a newspaper column using language widely criticized as racist. In another column, he compared Muslim women wearing burqas to letterboxes, a comment that sparked national debate in the UK. Normally, such remarks could severely damage a politician's career, but Johnson often brushed them off with humor, sarcasm, or exaggerated self-deprecation. The criticism rarely stuck the way it might have with a more conventional politician. Because again, the public image surrounding him wasn't that of a disciplined strategist. It was the image of a reckless joke, cracking eccentric, and eccentric people are often judged differently. But the most dramatic example came during the COVID-19 pandemic. While the United Kingdom was under strict lockdown rules, reports emerged that gatherings had taken place inside the Prime Minister's residence at 10 Downing Street. The scandal became known as Partygate. Investigations revealed that staff and officials attended social events while ordinary citizens were unable to visit family members, attend funerals, or celebrate holidays. Public reaction was intense. For many people, it felt like a betrayal of trust. Yet even during this scandal, something unusual happened. A significant portion of Johnson's supporters still viewed the situation through the lens of his familiar persona. To them, it wasn't a calculated abuse of power. It was just another example of Boris being disorganized, chaotic, and irresponsible. In other words, the same personality traits that had once made him entertaining were now softening the perception of his mistakes. This is one of the strange paradoxes of political branding. If a politician carefully cultivates the image of being competent, serious, and disciplined, then any mistake looks catastrophic. But if a politician cultivates the image of being messy, chaotic, and slightly ridiculous, then mistakes feel expected.
I love AI. Do you use AI?
Absolutely.
Do you use ChatGPT? Do you love ChatGPT? I love ChatGPT. I love it. ChatGPT is fantastic. It's so not ChatGPT.
What do you?
And when mistakes feel expected, they don't shock the public as much. By the time Johnson became Prime Minister in 2019, many voters already felt like they knew him. Even if that familiarity came through satire, they had seen him fall off bicycles. They had seen him stuck on a zip line, waving British flags. They had watched him fumble through television appearances. He wasn't just a politician. He was a character in the national story. Sometimes being mocked makes a politician feel human. But the danger is that when a politician becomes a character, the audience may start evaluating them the way they evaluate entertainment. Did they make us laugh? Did they seem relatable? Were they interesting? Those are questions you might ask about a comedian, but they're very different from the questions you should ask about someone running a country. Because political decisions don't happen in a comedy show. They happen in the real world, and the consequences are anything but funny.
So why does this happen? Why does ridicule sometimes strengthen politicians instead of weakening them? Political psychologists point to several reasons. First, there's something called the underdog effect. When people see someone being mocked by powerful institutions like media, celebrities, political elites, they may sympathize with that person, even if they disagree with them. Second, mockery can lower expectations. If everyone believes a politician is incompetent, then any competent action suddenly looks impressive. Third, humor makes politicians seem approachable. Serious politicians can feel distant and robotic. But a politician who laughs, makes mistakes, or becomes the subject of memes suddenly feels more human. Finally, mockery creates attention. And attention is the currency of modern politics, in a world of endless information. So instead of criticism, the biggest threat to a politician is to be ignored. Now, this doesn't mean satire is useless. In fact, satire has historically been one of the most powerful tools of criticism. But effective satire does something important. It targets ideas and actions, not just personalities. A good example of this style of humor can be seen in comedians like Ricky Gervais. Gervais often uses humor to expose hypocrisy, power dynamics, or uncomfortable truths. The joke isn't just the punchline. The joke reveals something meaningful. That's the difference between satire and empty mockery. Satire exposes problems. Mockery without substance can accidentally create sympathy. When jokes focus only on how silly a politician looks, how weird they sound, or how awkward they behave, the message disappears. And what remains is a strange side effect. The politician starts to feel relatable. The audience begins to think, sure, they're messy, but they're human. And suddenly, the criticism transforms into something closer to entertainment. But politicians are not entertainers. They make decisions that affect millions of lives. Their policies influence economies, wars, healthcare, and laws. Reducing them to memes may feel harmless, but it can sometimes distract from the real consequences of their decisions. That's it for this video. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed listening and hopefully learned something new. In next video, I'm going to discuss how corporate offices are designed to keep you focused on the task, and that not even furniture alignment is an accident. So, hope you will stick around, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.